brothers and sisters. 15 girls and 4 brothers. The most of them
From Madrid?
Yeah, and the most of them are artists. That's why I pretend to do a better work through art. And I've got 2 actresses, sisters. So you are with one member of the biggest family of Spain. We were 22.
I'm impressed.
We were 22, but now we are only 19.
Bueno, pues Mel, que nos empiezas contando un poco tu vida, un poco quién eres.
Yeah, can you start telling about yourself, about your life?
My life? Sure.
Yeah.
My grandfather was a dairy farmer in Kansas, and I grew up on a dairy farm in my early years. And then we moved to Missouri, and he opened dairy stores. And my father took over the business from my grandfather, and they wanted me to go into the dairy business, but I had no talent at all for that. I would have made a mess of it. So I became a reporter and a writer. I did investigative reporting. I did a lot of reporting on the mafia, and I was very happy doing that. And then I went to Florida working for the Washington Post Company, who owned 4 television stations around the country. I worked at their station in Jacksonville, Florida, and I enjoyed that for many years. Then I went to Tampa to run a TV station newsroom, and from there to Fort Myers, where I ran a whole station, a CBS station. And then I was recruited to the BBC, and I spent 4 years there working on some special projects for them. And then I liked that a lot. Very expensive to live in London. But then I went to Seattle, and I worked in Seattle for almost 8 years for a broadcast company. And then I was getting old, and I decided I didn't want to be doing that. So I took early retirement, came down here, and I still had it in the back of my mind that someone should write a book about Mr. Bronston, and no one had, which surprised me. So I called 4 publishers, and I sent them each the first chapter, and each publisher, well, 3 of the 4 wanted it, and I took the publisher that had the most experience with film books. So that's how the book came to be. And by the time I was writing it, most of the people who were part of the films were dead. And that's tough to write about a movie that was, 40 years old at the time I started, 50 years old almost, the time I wrote the book. But the son, Bill Bronston, was very helpful, and Bill was physically there on the set for a lot of the films in Spain. So he gave me a lot of color, and I was able to talk to one of the writers who is now passed. He was dying of cancer when I spent time with him. Very good. He wrote the love scenes for El Cid, and he wrote part of Fall of the Roman Empire. He wrote Circus World to his regret. He didn't like that film at all. I don't think it was very good either. It was kind of written under protest. The whole movie was made under protest. They didn't want to make it. And I also spent some time with the wife of one of the chief writers, Barsman. And he was dead, but his wife was there, was very good friends with Sophia Loren, and she was a great amount of information on the books, on how the movies were made, and really helped the book quite a bit.
Vamos a centrarnos primero. Que les cuente un poco la historia de cuando era niños, o lo que empiece por ahí. Ahora, cuando era niño y escucha la radio la música de
Yeah,
Chic.
can you tell us that little boy story when you were little, you're 14 and you listen to radio?
Yes, I was in, I think, junior high school at the time, and I used to study to classical music. I liked rock and roll, but I couldn't think when rock and roll was playing. So I listened to classical, and I heard this wonderful music on KSD was the station, Radio 55, and in St. Louis. And at the end, usually the music, they tell you what it is. And this music ended, and it was breathtaking, and they never said what it was. They just did a commercial. So I called the station. I said, "What was that music?" They said, "Oh, that was El Cid." I said, "Well, what is El Cid? What is that?" He said, "Well, that's a movie that's opening up in St. Louis shortly. So you should go see that if you like the music." So I did see it, and I was terribly impressed. I immediately got books on the subject to find out how close the movie was to history. I found more music by that composer because he had done Ben-Hur. He had done King of Kings for Bronston. But he went way back. He did Spellbound for Hitchcock. He got an Oscar, I think. He'd done a lot of films. I thought his music was wonderful. He also was a classical composer. He split his time. And I got some of his classical works, which were marvelous. So really the music was the entrance for me to the film. I saw El Cid with my cousin, who was 2 years older. Every Saturday we went to the movies. We